All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, going through a series of self-made video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. Our textbook is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Naylor. We're almost halfway into Chapter 7 of 18, and we're up to creating a user's role on database creation. And as the author mentions right here, now that we've updated the code to add new data for an admin user, we're going to recreate the database in order to recreate an admin user. Before we do this, we're also going to create a new role named users when the identity database is created. So we add the code as shown on page 221 here, the new code right here, which creates the user's role. All right, and then after we do that, we update the connection string, and this is the part of the connection string, so it changed from identity.mdf to identity2. All right, as you know, this will create a new database. This database stores the identity information. Okay, then we start the project without debugging and log in as an admin, and you should see when the identity database should be recreated, and in the users table, we now have the information for first name, last name, date of birth, address, etc. All right. In addition to the new user data, the ASP roles also contains a user's role as shown here on the top of page 222. Now next, as the author mentions, we're going to create a user's admin controller. Hopefully you're starting to see this, that what you're ending up doing here is it's very important that when you start to go over and you start to do this stuff, that you start with the end in mind. And what I mean by that is you should try to have an overall picture, write something where you are overall going through and explaining what it is you're trying to do. You should have an idea. That doesn't mean it's not going to change, but you should have something drawn out where you figure out the project structure. You start to figure out, oh, I'm going to need a controller for this. Oh, I'm going to need these models. You know, one controller could literally communicate with scores, technically with hundreds of models. All right? One controller could deal with scores, hundreds, thousands of views. That's not at all inconceivable. But you should have at least some kind of an idea. Now that said, does that mean that I'm kind of stuck to that? No. As the project goes on, you'll probably add things, change things around, remove things. All right. So the user's admin controller, as it says, will handle all the requests from an administrator for managing and viewing user data. Okay. So here it is as shown on the bottom of 222 and the top of page 223. What do you want to be able to do with the users? Well, here's the first thing. How about to display all of your users? So we update the index method of the user admin controller to return a full list of users. And there it is. The index method on the bottom of the page, as they say, has been updated to be asynchronous. It obtains a list of users asynchronously. And the author will talk more about that later on in the text. Next, we create a view for displaying the users in our, in other words, we need an index method. So we've got a controller, all right? We've got a controller, and that controller may or may not have models associated with it. Think about the job of everything here, all right? Okay, the controller. The user types a URL from his or her computer. They hit the enter key. not immediately, but soon after, that request is going to be funneled into some controller. That controller has to figure out, okay, does this involve data? In other words, is it going to involve a database or something with data, or does this involve something with our business rules? And if one of those or both of them are true, the correct model is going to have to be called. All right? And it'll have to do its thing, and it'll return some information to the user. That information for the user then will have to figure out which view or views, if any, it has to go and call so that information can be returned to the user. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what's going on here. All right, on page 225, they talk about displaying then. So there's our list of users. User details. So to display details for a user, including the roles allocated, modify the details method as shown here. It says here the key methods here are the user manager.find by async ID, used to find a user by his or her ID. That's right here. And the get roles, which is used to find the roles the user is assigned to. Next, we need to create a details view, and that's shown right here on the bottom of 226 and the top half of 227. Once that code is completed, we are told that we should run the program again. Go into user, user details, and now we get this information. All right. Roles the user belongs to, they're an admin, and there's their information. Now this is just the way that they happened here to take this stuff and format it. Okay? And the author says on the bottom of the page, whoops, as you can see, using this has shortened the code but displays the data from the user's address differently from the other fields. That's because the HTML helper method doesn't have any instructions on how to display this, so it uses its own default HTML. You can see the date of birth, etc. I'm going to demonstrate how to fix this formatting by using what's called a display template. So, bottom, the rest of page 229 and going on to page 230, as the author says here, display templates are a useful feature of ASP.NET to allow you to specify a template for determining how a model will appear when you use the display for HTML helper method. To add that, as it says, add a new folder under View Shared called Display Templates. Did you have to make a new folder? Of course not. But it is nice when this project starts to almost seem to get out of control to start taking things that naturally seem to belong together and put them together. All right, so we add an empty view named address, and then we update it as shown here. Okay, so it says started without debugging and view the details. The address should now be at least somewhat formatted. Using a display template, the author mentions on the top of page 231, may seem like overkill, but it'll save code later when dealing with other areas of the site. All right. All right. How about a new user? How about an administrator creating a new user? It says to start a new user or to create a new user, start by updating the get version of the create method, as shown here. Okay. Async task, and notice the select list will be used in the view to generate a list of checkboxes, one per role. Okay, here's that new information that we just saw. So we come in here, we add the view, create, it's a register. It's not a partial view. It will have reference to the script libraries. We'll use a layout page. We come in here And you see the code on 233, 234. On the bottom of 234, this is the new code that we're adding. And basically, when we get done, we've added this. So we kind of get this by default, so to speak, from what we had, and we're adding this stuff. And notice, here's a key thing. Are they an administrator or are they a user? Okay, all right. All right, next what's discussed on page 236 is using an editor template. Editor templates are a feature of ASP.NET MVC to allow you to specify a template to determine how a particular model will appear when using the edit for method. Why should we care? Because by using that, it'll change this, and in particular this here, to what you see on page 238, so it'll look like this, which looks a lot nicer and a lot more professional. All right, and they show you basically what you end up doing on 238 and 239. Again, there's just not the time to sit here and go over all of this code. And it's another place where, as I mentioned, although it's a very well-written book, I wish that the author had done more with explanation and less with showing you all the code. I know that if he would have left all the code in there, that rather than being a 628-page book, it would have been 1,000 pages. But it might have been much easier to understand that way. All right. So notice we've added a new user. As it says, if we click on the details, this is what we get. And it tells us the role the user belongs to. So that was creating a new user. Well, once you create one, you have to also be able to edit that user. So as it says, start by adding a new view model. All right. And here's the code. There are no fields in here for editing the password. All right. We're not handling that in here. But we do come in, as shown on the next page here, on 244, and we do come in and create a new view. All right. You set the title up, etc. And as we can see on page 246, we have to add some code to handle the new stuff, or the stuff that doesn't naturally come. The town, the country, etc. Once we do that, this is what we get for editing a user. The author talks about taking the email address in here and making it read-only. All right? And when you think about it, that's kind of being used as a key in here. Right now, at least, that when we create a user, the email address is what's being used to identify him or her. So they make it read-only, as you can see on page 249, right there. All right, so the last thing to worry about in here on 250 and 251 is we've created a user, we can edit a user, but we need to be able to delete users. The author says they're not going to include the code for deleting a user in the project because almost every commercial project, deleting users has never been a requirement. All right. Rather than deleting a user, quite often what you'll do is if the user, so if you've got somebody that you know, let's say that was an administrator that left the company, you might give their username to somebody else. You might put them in a log file or whatever. All right. Starting on 251, and going on to 252, 250, 253, 254, I think. 5, 6, 7, 258, all the way to 259, they start talking about user self-registration. It says, so far we've allowed the admin user to create users, but we've provided no way for users to register themselves. We'll address that here by modifying the existing methods and views created when we initially created the project. The controllers that handle self-management are the account controller and the manage controller. All right? So start by opening the account controller and modifying the post version so that all the fields in the register view model are assigned during user creation. So we're adding a view. As you can see here, and this is shown in the book on page 252, the code that we have to change isn't much. We're adding the address information on page 254, as shown right here. On 255, 256, 257, and 258, they talk about updating again, and in particular, if you look on 257, using a partial view. Create registers user partial, and on 258, same thing. Again, remember that quite often, typically at least, the reason that you're going to come in here and you're going to use partial views is so that you can minimize the amount of code duplication that you have. All right, doing all that ends up with this. And again, I don't believe they really mention it in here. But for example, what if I put in my email as jscott@rankin.edu? And then I realized afterwards, geez, that should have been jpscott. Well, I could go in and register myself again, and I'd actually have two of them in there. All right, well, how do I get around that? Well, again, it depends on a lot of things. There might be a way for me to contact an administrator directly via email or whatever. It might be that we provide some kind of a utility program so that the administrator can look at accounts and says, oh, there's this jscott@rankin.edu. It's been here for, let's say, 6 months, and there's never been a lick of activity on it. Maybe they get rid of those or log them or whatever. Again, the stuff that you do in here, it just depends. That's all I can tell you. All right, the next thing that's discussed in here is some of the things that you're going to allow users to do, such as, here's the user details. Allow a user to view personal details. To allow users to view their personal details, start by modifying the index method of the manage controller. It says so it sees this. This method uses the user.identity.getUserID to get the current user's ID, ensuring that the user can view their stuff but not anybody else's. Then we add, notice, a partial view in here, user details partial, so that they can come in there and they can view their information. Why would they want to view their information? Well, this is giving them the opportunity to go in and make changes. Again, maybe they've moved and they want that address to change. All right, I know when I moved recently, we decided that at the house that I used to have, we had a landline. And we decided when we moved, we're not going to have any more landlines. There was really no reason. We're just going to use our cell phones, type of an idea. Notice we add here, there's to change your password. All right. Here's an edit, which I believe is going to bring up again. Oh, where was it? This. So we can go back in and make changes accordingly. All right. So, as it says, we're going to allow the users to edit their details. It's a similar process to an administrator editing the details. All right. So we just looked at the user, and this is the admin editing the stuff, and here's the user. Start by adding a new edit method to the manage controller to find the details of the current user and return them. It says we're going to reuse the view model, edit user view model, but we won't use the ID or role list. It's one thing you should always be shooting for. And again, this is the kind of thing that you get the more experience you have. And that is that reuse code whenever possible. All right. So we add another edit here. Looks very similar to the other one. And when it brings it up, that's what you see. So you'll notice one thing that's not on here is there's no password. All right. Again, how that is handled is going to depend on the particular company that's dealing with it. Are you going to allow users to reset their passwords? If you forget a password, what are you going to do to handle that? All right, and every place sets it up probably in their own unique way. All right, on the bottom of page 271, allowing users, here it is, to reset their passwords. So, as mentioned here, at the moment, the website has no way for users to reset their passwords. All right. The ASP.NET identity code that enables users to reset their password works on the basis that a user can be emailed, but since we're using fictional email address, it says we're going to cut this step out of the code while still explaining how the functionality works. In a real production system, the author recommends that you implement the code to send an external link to a user's email address and allow them to click back on the reset password page. You want to make sure that if the admin gets a message, that indeed that is the user, and that the user does want a new password. Not that somebody else could possibly get in and try to do that. And that's what they talk about in here. All right, notice on the bottom of 272, because we are doing this for demo purposes and to bypass sending the confirmation email, this code will allow you to alter the password for any user if you enter a valid email address. So never use this in a real system. All right. If nothing else, what you want to make sure you do there, always err on the side of caution. Make it much harder for somebody to do something, all right, as opposed to making it easier. The last part of this section, before we go on to adding authorization for product and category administration, is managing password complexity. All right. The author says you can update the password validator code that's found in the app start identity.config. So what are they showing here? Required length, I don't know if that's a minimum or if it has to be 6 characters. All right, non-letter or digit, so you need a special character, you need a digit, you need at least a lowercase character, and you need at least an uppercase character. All right, when I come back, we're going to finish this chapter up by going over adding authorization for product and category administration. So I'll be back to add that, finish this chapter up in just a couple minutes.